Welcome to a new part of The Floor. As with the previous part, I'm going to be messing with audio stuff again. Wasn't really happy with it last time, so we'll just tinker more. You guys can continue letting me know what you think. This show is the regular interaction show where we get to talk about specific topics, have discussions, a bit of back and forth with some of the more interesting comments I find from you guys. Today, I've gone through the comments of the previous Floor and just some general stuff over the series we're currently running and some more recent videos. Hopefully that'll be fun, so no defined topic for now. And I say regular, but Christ, it's been well over 2 weeks since the last part. Where the hell has the time gone? Well, I kind of know. It's my new obsession with VR, which is really kind of taking over my life at the moment. In fact, footage in the background today, I'll show you some Guild Wars stuff. We will obviously be talking a lot about that. But I found an amazing demo of Final Fantasy X Zanarkand recreated in VR, where you get to really mess with a bunch of the different items and creatures and characters. Really fun, completely blew my mind, and was something I very much adored as someone so nostalgic about that game. And hey, it's vaguely appropriate. I've got some questions about 12 here today, or at least comments. And finally, as well, as I record today, it's Halloween, and it's Halloween 2020. What does that mean? Well, it's actually my 10-year anniversary on YouTube right now. I did have a plan way back earlier in the year. If you remember the big channel update I did around February, I had very lofty and exciting plans for this day. I wanted to start doing something totally new, and then 2020 happened and most of it fell apart. So it's kind of a bummer of a day, really. I'm a bit depressed and frustrated that I'm not where I wanted to be. But hey, in the coming weeks and months, we'll climb out of this hole and figure things out. 10 years though, Christ, I mean, it doesn't feel like 10 to me. It feels like just a couple. It's true what they say. As the years go by, they start seeming to move faster and faster. I wish I could reverse that, I really do. It doesn't feel like I've justified 10 years. But there you have it. I threw up a little tweet, but I figured I should mention it on the channel itself somewhere too. Right, so let's get in on the comments as the fireworks roar outside my window. First one here from Friggin' Paco, who says, lovely name, by the way. I feel like I've just read a racial slur out somehow. My constant gripe with the Norn in Guild Wars 2 is that they were stripped of what made their race unique by making their transformation an elite skill, instead of a toggle of some sort. Many of us who played Guild Wars 1 will remember how they maintained their armor and weapons in bear form. I find the current state of Norn aesthetics to be wanting. Many of them are still compared to big, oafish giant humans that just party, though yes, you hear them talking about making their legend in Holbrack and some other places. Otherwise, yes, they look just like slightly heartier humans that are adapted to colder climates and high altitudes. I've always desired for ArenaNet to make a Norn revamp, but I've been so disappointed with their relentless drive forward to new things. The older the game gets, the more there are actual vestiges of 2012 problems that could be improved. And I know many people will tell me that ArenaNet is better off constantly looking forwards. I half agree. We would maintain our homes and vehicles to make sure they're up to snuff, and there really is no difference in an MMO when you can see some of the wallpaper peeling from its various aesthetics, revealing room for improvement. It's tough to say those things about a game I adore to pieces, but it comes from a place of wanting to improve it, not just criticize it and end my commentary there. Yeah, I feel the same too, and I think most people you'll find online, if they're talking crap about Guild Wars a lot of the time, is because they desperately want that topic to be addressed because it's something that they love. I always find that the games I genuinely don't like, I don't really have many suggestions for, I don't really talk about much, but the games I love, I end up always hating parts of too and feel desperate to talk about them. Anyway, over to the Norn. I do think you've got a point here, and it's funny, I did that whole discussion on the previous Floor about the Norn and how they feel kind of just like big people, and it'd be interesting to see Cantha look that in the eye, and that might be cool. And this had completely gone over my head. I guess it's become so natural to me now to forget about the fact that the Norn can transform. That element of them doesn't even factor into the conversation, and that's a real shame, because you're right. Yes, in truth, they're the shape-shifting race, and now when you think about having like a planty race and a small intelligent race and a bestial, cat-like feline race and humans, the Norn do feel super special and different because transformation is their super special different thing. I still remember when I watched the very first Guild Wars 2 trailer, in which we see a Coden on a field next to air. And I remember the Coden weren't in the lore, it hadn't been introduced to us at that time. I remember watching that trailer and thinking, wow, how cool is that? When we play as Norn, we'll be able to customize what kind of bear we become now. If we go bear form, we can actually become a polar bear if we like. And that's what I thought the Coden was. That's the kind of expectations I had for that feature. And I don't think anyone was wrong to feel like transformation was meant to be a big thing, because the Norn were introduced in Eye of the North specifically to be a big part of Guild Wars 2, and at that moment they gave them the transformation idea. And then it kind of hasn't been emphasized. I think there's two reasons why it's so easy to forget now. One is obviously, yeah, we don't really transform much ourselves. Now, it is true around the 2013 era of dungeon running, there was reason to bear form in specific highly optimized groups where you could like rush into a wall and do good damage, a bit like the Fiery Greatsword rush. The thing is with that, even while that was an element of play, very few of us were doing it, and even while you were toggling into bear mode to enact one skill in the middle of a cluster of tons of other really bright animations. Don't forget, animation creep was even worse back then. So you didn't really appreciate being a bear or anything. Maybe you used it to rush through a corridor or something, and then you just toggle out, but your focus is not on the RP or the experience of being a bear or any of the other transforms for what it's worth. It's on what you're specifically trying to get out of the gameplay. And I do think that that's not necessarily fulfilling what a lot of people wanted. There was a little bit of a thing for a while as well in World vs. World, where you could get stealth on any character you liked from, what is it, Snow Leopard form, I think, was allowing you to stealth. So there was a bit of that too, but yeah, that real fantasy of feeling like it's a big part of the character wasn't there. I think you're right to identify it's because it wasn't a toggle. They made it an elite skill, and there's so many problems with it being an elite skill. I remember on the forums before the game came out, the devs gave two blatantly contradictory comments about elite skills, and no one questioned it on the forums. This was one of those rare places where I was like in the super negative camp and I was saying this doesn't make any sense. And I still stand by it not making any sense. They had given in one pre-release comment that elite skills were supposed to be these big, build-defining moments with long cooldowns and exciting, powerful effects. And then they had said at a separate time, pre-release also, that racial skills were going to be deliberately designed to be subpar compared to regular skills. And they deliberately wanted to do that because they didn't want racial skills to be too relevant for buildcraft. They didn't want people to feel like they had made a mistake picking a Char instead of a Norn when they're at level 80 and 100 hours in. They don't like that experience from other MMOs, and they wanted to iron that out. And cleaning that kind of stuff up is what Guild Wars 2 is so good at, and people forget where ArenaNet's true genius was. It was in these kinds of elements of quality of life that they really baked into the game at a very, very deep level. So fundamentally, racial skills were never meant to be that good, and that's why when you see they do become good, like, oh, the Immobilize is really strong for Gorseval when Gorseval comes out, they nerf it. Or, like, with the aforementioned bear form stuff. I mean, that also was kind of a bit buggy and obviously unintended behavior on top. So they kind of had a double reason to nerf that. But these two statements don't work. You can't have an elite racial skill, something that's supposed to be powerful and build-defining and epic, that's designed to also be so rubbish people don't want to pick it. I think there is a way that ArenaNet could have had impactful racial skills, and even to this day, I think there's a way, and that is to give every race, no matter who you picked, access to alternate races' racial abilities, except you don't get like the cosmetic elements to them, so to speak. I would actually tie it to a whole new specialization. I'd give people 4 specializations, the 4th one being a racial one, and you can toggle, do you want to be Asura specialized, do you want to be Norn specialized, do you want to be Char specialized, and what that would do, maybe you could add passives to it as well, actual traits if you liked, but most importantly, that would swap your access to various utility skills. And now, nobody's getting screwed, there's no such thing as making the wrong decision for gameplay, and now bear form can mean something. But even my solution there, which I proposed several times in the past, still kind of doesn't tackle the real issue, which is that this whole element of the Norn was declared to be a skill and to be a part, therefore, of the combat experience rather than anything else. And as long as it's only a part of the combat experience, you're less likely to see people indulging in it, you know, for more passive and relaxed and social areas of the MMO, which are all still just as valuable. If I think about my original expectations of Guild Wars 2 before 2012 came around, and the Norn, maybe I imagine Hullbrack, and as I walk through Hullbrack, I see some players in human mode, and I see other players in various transform modes, just chilling out. But that, of course, never ever happens, because there's no combat in the cities, so why would you do it? I think the idea of having it be a toggle, in addition to maybe some of these other ideas that I proposed, could do a lot for the gameplay side of this. And then returning to my other point earlier, I don't think it's just gameplay. I think the other thing is the story too. I don't think we've had any really great Norn that talk about the fact that they can transform or show us them transforming and utilize it a lot. I mean, we certainly get a bit in the novels, and Iceboot Saga's been pretty good with Bram. That's been a part of the story. But when I look at, say, all the ambient dialogue that is on all the maps, both from 2012 and as we go forwards, and all the potential we had with all those Norns, nearly none of them really talk about transforming much. Meanwhile, in Guild Wars 1, pretty much every Norn you met, you had a fight with before they talked to you, and during that fight, they tried to transform. You know, we get to see random Vigil and Pact soldiers, you know, hit up bear mode every now and then, but there's just not enough weight or substance to it, and I really think that ArenaNet did drop the ball here. I forgot about it on my previous video, and maybe now I'm not so surprised if I think about it more. Also, to the other half of your comment about housekeeping and always wanting to look forwards, I think for those of us who have been playing Guild Wars 2 on the long term, we are more accepting of delays for new content in order to clean up old stuff than new people or very casual players. And the truth is that the new people and the casual players vastly outnumber us, and if they won't accept it, then you won't see the studio ever do it. As much as I want to see ArenaNet, you know, hit the brakes and clean everything up, if it's not justified in terms of number, I can't make any argument against that. The other thing to think about, and is on my mind often, is I feel like for most years that Guild Wars 2 has existed, ArenaNet as a studio have been working on other projects and have been expecting to, you know, like, move on from Guild Wars 2, maybe at some point. Maybe move to a Guild Wars 3, maybe replace it with some sci-fi game or whatever. I feel like there's always been kind of a belief that it's okay to let the house fall apart a little bit, because we'll be moving on to something new soon, and now we've just gone, like, 10 years... Not quite 10 years, we've gone 8 years, where whatever else they've been trying has fallen through and fallen through and fallen through, and now it looks like they've made all these terrible decisions, but this isn't the way they imagined it to have gone. I wouldn't be surprised about that. I also wouldn't be surprised that since the layoffs recently, they might now be thinking super long-term about Guild Wars 2. They might be thinking, wow, we could do this game infinitely, forever. And in that case, yeah, they'll find ways to slot the housekeeping in, maybe after End of Dragons. It would be a good idea to do it there, especially if the story of the dragons is concluded. That's kind of a nice tie-in, you know, a nice moment to move into a totally fresh idea for the story, and also to refresh the fundamentals of the product, maybe. Next, we have a comment from Pan Belacqua, who says, I think a potentially interesting topic would be ideas for how Cantha's going to play out. Not the expansion itself, but what we're looking at after it. My guess is we'll get 5 to 7 maps, covering much of Xingji, Kaineng, the Jade Sea, followed by a saga that delivers Echo Vowed, potentially the Battle Isles, and expands the regions we get in the expansion. From there, the Battle Isles are an excellent launching point for expansions taking us outside of previously established regions. My pet theory is that we'll get a Primordus Utopia expansion afterwards, but that's really going out on a limb. Yeah, Primordus is weird to me. I don't know what's going on, because a part of me now sort of believes it might be dealt with by the end of this saga. What I really like the idea of is that they go for this fire versus ice thing in a big way, and the climax of this saga is that we think we're going to destroy them both at once, but something goes wrong. Maybe Jormag is dealt with. Hell, maybe Jormag's a proper ally to us at this point, but Jormag dies as the result of this mistake or whatever, and Primordus escapes at the last moment. I kind of like that idea. That way they can really deal with fire versus ice and make it all feel good, and then suddenly there's a shock horror. This thing survived, and it will get its full depths expansion with the Asura and all those kinds of amazing things later down the line, because my ultimate dream remains Primordus last. As for what we'll do immediately after Cantha, I love your comment in the idea that Echo Vowed might not come right at the start. I think people need to really realize this, that they might not do all of Cantha straight away. I've mentioned this before, and it bears repeating. Look at the Path of Fire release that didn't include Istan, that didn't include Corner, that hell even kind of feels like it didn't include all of Vabi to a certain extent. I mean, if you overlay the maps in the right way. There are swathes of Cantha that we just might not get to straight away. My guess is Echo Vow, just because of the teaser and the environments that we went through. Though you can also just make an argument that the teaser for End of Dragons is following a geographical route, and so obviously it bypasses Echo Vowed. It means nothing more than that. But Echo Vowed is good to separate off, just so that you can dedicate something to the Sylvari, maybe, and Urgos, and the Wardens, and all those kinds of beautiful things. And then there are places in Cantha too that we just didn't get to go to. Just like how after POF in Season 4 we got the Sandswept Isles, that took us to an area of the Alona region, but was not in Guild Wars 1. They can do the same thing here. There's been an island to the south of Xingji on that world map for God knows how long, obviously since Factions came out, that I've always wanted to visit, and there's never been any content there. Well, in Guild Wars 2, maybe we'll get a living world release that puts us on that island and gives us a name for that island. It's weird. I've had so many moments covering this game over the years where I find myself in a moment exactly like this. I'll say, wow, wouldn't it be cool to go to that island? And then I blink and like 2 years have passed and suddenly I'm doing a video where that's what's happening. We're going to that place, you know, just like we've seen very recently with the Verdant Cascades. So I'd love to see that. Maybe Minister Wona's estate, like you saw in the background footage of the previous episode of The Floor. And then the Battle Isles. So the Battle Isles, I like your idea that they are a launching point for multiple other continents. If you think about the Dermond Priory floor map, it had trade routes leading off to all these distant lands that we have no idea about, which is so cool, guys, because it means there's civilizations there and there's all kinds of established stuff that we can follow on from once the Elder Dragons are dealt with. Hell, maybe we even follow an Elder Dragon to one of those places. So the Battle Isles being that staging point is very cool. The idea of it being flooded and the waters recede and all that stuff, I think you can work out. It should be fine. The other idea I like for the Battle Isles too, though, is that we actually get them before End of Dragons. Wouldn't it be cool if the epilogue, you know, because we had a prologue for Icebrood Saga, wouldn't it be cool if the epilogue had us on the Battle Isles, like a staging ground kind of release, where we are, you know, we're nearly there. Well, we're not really nearly there, but we're like halfway to Cantha. If you think about it, the Battle Isles are perfectly sized for one Living World release. The only kink here is that with the roadmap from earlier in the week, maybe you missed my video on it, does not actually talk about an epilogue. That was something I wanted to mention in the commentary for that video, but I didn't in the end. There's no epilogue? That's kind of strange. Maybe we'll get one anyway, but I'd like to think so, and the Battle Isles would be cool there, I think. T.S. Bulmer says, here's a question for you. When it comes to LP videos, do you have any particular feelings about someone experiencing the story through the game as opposed to through the LP? Do some games benefit from commentary throughout, perhaps making the story more coherent? Are there games where the gameplay experience informs the story in such an important way that it's definitely best experienced the first time via first-hand play? I've had this in mind with the Final Fantasy XII LP. I played it maybe a bit over halfway through at release. I loved it, but I put it down due to unrelated reasons and never got back into playing it. I have the Steam version, and I mean to play through it, but I've only got so much time. I'll be listening to the LP as it's released regardless, so I'm wondering if I owe it to myself to go ahead and make the time to play it ahead of where the LP is. I think this is a really good question. First of all, the problem you've had there is a problem I suffer from, and I think most people do with big RPGs, where if you put it down halfway, it's hard to remember everything that was happening in the story and also everything that was exciting for the gameplay to get back into that moment, you know, because maybe you just got a really cool upgrade or nice new bit of gear or a cool build idea right before you stop playing the game. If you come back like half a year later, the context for why that build or why that gear was strong or exciting is going to be completely lost on you as well. So it's not just about forgetting the story, it's just about forgetting what you've been conditioned to enjoy at that halfway mark. So big RPGs are kind of weird in that, you know, I think a lot of people can comfortably spend 60 hours on a game, even very casual gamers, even people with very busy schedules. They can do 60 hours on a game. but they're being asked to do it all at once, and they're being asked to do it maybe in quite a short time frame, and that's where it starts to trip people up, you know? You can be a very casual viewer of like a TV show that has bite-sized little 20 or 40-minute chunks, and before you know it, you're on your 5th rewatch of The Office or something, and you've sunk untold hours into it. A lot of PvP games are like that as well, where because you can get something bite-sized, overall you will do the full investment. But massive RPGs, and not exclusively JRPGs for what it's worth, they don't let you do that. I've always kind of liked the idea of the videos getting around that somewhat. I'm always looking for a reason to justify what I do and, you know, why the video might be better than playing. That's what I really aim for. I want the videos to be better than playing. That way, there's a reason for the video to exist. And I kind of like the idea that if I format them into hour chunks, you know, they're bite-sized enough that you can pick them up and drop them. But the truth is, if I'm not keeping a certain pace with FF12, your enthusiasm and your excitement for it is going to wane. And that's actually one of the reasons I'm so frustrated with how slowly I've been uploading these so far this month. I want it to be a good 6 or 7 episodes further ahead right now. More specifically to the other part of the question, I do think there are a lot of games that are more worth you actually playing. Any kind of skill expression game, I think, yes, playing it yourself matters more. And obviously that comes down to a lot of competitive experiences. Even RPGs, like you can watch me playing 12 and you can see me setting up some kind of skill combo like oil plus a flame brand so that my guy who swings his sword does a lot more damage because of that combo. You could see me set that up, and that's all well and good, but if you'd played it yourself, you might have been doing any number of other combos. It all depends on how robust the RPG is, especially when you get to stuff like ARPGs, where a lot of the way you play is determined by the RNG of the loot you got and how you're utilizing that. You know, watching a YouTube series that is just one playthrough is never going to be able to express all of that variance that was possible. And, you know, overly sandboxy games like Minecraft, even like quite artistic games sometimes, that you'd think you can get the full experience from a YouTube run, don't actually work. Like, I remember when Matt and I played Brother, A Tale of Two Sons, we did a weird, like, co-op thing with that. But a huge part of that game is how the controller interacts with the game world itself and how they play with that in the narrative later. If you're not actually physically sitting there building muscle memory with that controller in that way, yeah, you're missing out. Honestly, I like that games have this value add where they can't be completely invalidated by simply watching it online. If they could be, then I think we'd have a lot of problems on our hands as an industry where YouTubers are essentially being seen as enemies of games rather than driving sales towards them. They're taking them away, kind of a form of soft piracy. You'd see a lot more conversation happening about, you know, having to buy a license to redistribute or air a game and all that kind of stuff. I like this place that we're in right now. I feel valued as someone who produces videos. I feel like I do provide a service for the games themselves and the development studios, so that wouldn't be the case if I could just make a video and you'd get the full experience. Even if I am trying to add as much value myself and be as all-encompassing as I possibly can be myself. An interesting idea from Bash Chelik here, who quotes the devs: during global faction mobilization events, players can pitch in to train, rally, and build trust with factions both familiar and unlikely. He says, oh god, I hope this means doing missions for your respected faction you picked at the start of your story. Vigil, Order of Whispers, and Durban Priory. Make them feel like active agents in the world and consequently more believable. They are such wasted potential. I don't even remember when my faction characters joined since they were made so irrelevant in later releases. Yes, I could rant all day about this and how bad the Pact as a construct and what a cop-out the Pact as a construct was for Guild Wars as a setting. And it's, you know, not a surprise to me that they were kind of playing with the destruction of the Pact for a while there, and I would have been happy to have seen it. Yeah, the order that we joined doesn't feel like it matters. At least for a while on the character select screen, it had like the banner there. Does it still? I don't think it does. It still does, right? On the top right. As you scroll through your characters, it would show you who they joined. Nowadays, it is easy to forget. I'm ashamed to say I forget for a lot of my characters, though my account's swelled to quite a lot of character slots, so maybe it's a little bit forgivable. Yes, having this, I hadn't thought of it, but for the new stuff, as the saga comes down, would be really good. It fits in lore, and they do often nod back to the order we chose, if at least in referencing like our mentor character that died, which they do very regularly. So it's totally in the ballpark of what I can imagine ArenaNet doing. Hell, there's a lot of factions in the world that maybe would be fun to look at as well. Like, what about the Arcane Eye? What about the Pact on top of the constituent orders? What about all these new, like, Aurene worshipping adherents that we see all over the place? There's a ton of factions they can play with. Awakened. I kind of just want to see it to be another big melting pot of loads of forces all around Tyria, helping out against multiple different dragon attacks. Not just one dragon, not just, you know, a big fight against Kralkatorrik, but we'll see activities from a few of them. Hopefully a little look in on the Deep Sea Dragon as a shocker that would justify that early teaser trailer we saw, and then go from there. Also, I don't have the image here, but I did see another comment, I think it was from Noct on the last video, about how the teaser trailer for Icebrood Saga did have centaurs on it. And we haven't seen anything to do with the centaurs this season so far at all. Well, what if the centaurs are some of these factions that will help us to fight back? It's kind of weird because in the teaser, I'm pretty sure we see the centaurs whipping slaves. So I would have expected them to be antagonists here. But maybe they'll, you know, put down the whip and they'll try and help us out. Fighting alongside centaurs is a novel idea, especially the thought of an Asura riding on one of them. Now that would be cool. Next, we have a message from Darg and Beast Tamer, who says, I don't know if I'm just smooth-brained, but the story so far for FF12 is so damn convoluted and contrived. Compared to FFX's simple one-track narrative and memorable characters, this is a clusterfuck. At least Penelo and Lamont's scene was well done. And B says, no, it's just how the plot's structured. It's a clue of several threads with most of them going nowhere. The worst part is they sacrifice character interaction for this, and then the story doesn't really deserve it. It is definitely true. I can't remember what part I start talking about this, but it's definitely true you get way less character interaction in 12, but I disagree that it's contrived. Actually, I think a lot of the politics and the scenes that you're getting make perfect sense and do establish kind of a realistic setting. It might not be fully clear just yet, but the other thing I would really like to say is right around that Bujerba arc in the game is when you get a lot of these weird flashes all over the place. Like, I think there's a flash over to Arcades for a second. You've got the stuff with Ondor, you've got the stuff with Lamont. It's all a little bit messy, but basically Final Fantasy XII is split into 3 broad acts. And once, it's only really in Act 1 that things feel really messy. It kind of becomes a very linear, straightforward progression early on in Act 2, which is about where the videos that I'm recording right now are. So I'll be interested to see how people feel as it basically starts to feel more like FFX. And it's weird because the reason that happens, I think, is they started to run out of money. And these are some of the topics I'm really, really excited to talk about, and how the scope for the game had to be rapidly refined as a release date loomed upon the devs in some of the upcoming videos. But I completely understand it, honestly. And the kind of antiquated, like, convoluted dialogue that I often would be pausing to go, like, Google define doesn't help much either. And finally, we have a little response about a comment I made. When did I make this comment? Of the idea of falling over a boat on a cruise ship and just disappearing forever, and how scary that is. Willis says, regarding your comment about falling off the side of a boat, I watched only one episode of the TV show Carrier. In that one episode, they wake up to find one crew member missing. Presumably, he fell off the side. The crew had gotten lazy regarding the rule to wear life jackets when you're on deck, and had smuggled some alcohol on board. They looked for him for about a day, then promptly resumed their travel to their destination. It didn't seem they looked too hard for him. Always scared me to travel on a cruise. The fear that I'd fall off the side and no one would really care. They also say that Rudolf Diesel, the inventor of the diesel engine, disappeared in a similar way. He was on a boat with his wife. The next day, he wasn't on board. Lots of conspiracy theories regarding that. So I'd actually heard about this thing with Diesel before. I didn't know about any conspiracy theories, but yeah, basically, I think he was on a... maybe I should look this up before recording this video. I think he was trying to sell some technology that the Germans also wanted, and there's like an idea he might have been murdered. But I had heard, and I thought the idea was he'd commit suicide, because he'd gone to his bed, but not slept in it. Like, his clothes were still neatly folded up and left there, as though he was going to climb in, but he didn't. And the idea is, yeah, he may have just jumped off. I think that multiple people found his body afterwards, but he was, like, super decomposed even after just a couple of days. It's weird as well, because we're talking about, like the North Sea and the Channel. I don't know exactly when he supposedly might have jumped off, but this isn't a vast body of water, and yet it took days and days and days for people to find him. Yeah, it's creepy. It really is. Though I have to say, my impression of cruise ships nowadays is they're so massive and epically proportioned that you could spend your entire time on a cruise and comfortably never find yourself anywhere near the edge because the thing's so big it's got like multiple hotel complexes and parks and all kinds of crazy stuff on it. Honestly, one of the coolest things about mega engineering these days, I think, is the construction of cruise ships, as terrible as they are for the environment and all that. Anyway, so there you go, guys. That's an episode of The Floor. Please feel free to leave any comments or thoughts you have down below. On the previous part I did a couple of weeks ago, I actually ran out of messages before I really felt like I'd filled in a whole video. So don't hold back. Don't be scared. Anything interesting, any kind of cool discussion, and we'll do another one of these random roundtable styles. I'm still a little bit concerned about the viewership and support of these videos. It's a bit on the low side, but we'll see if we can find some kind of good schedule for it. And hey, if you guys want to talk about VR as well, based on the footage in the background, I could chat all day about that. So any comments on that, maybe we could do a dedicated topic to that. That would be fantastic. Keep an eye out as well for the next super Q&A for any patrons out there. Thanks very much for the last 10 years, guys, and I hope to give you much more to come. See you next time, and happy Halloween.